Good evening, spiritual warriors. Welcome to our program, Spiritual Warriorship. We discuss and read from books by His Holiness Bhakti Tirtha Swami, and I welcome everyone. We're going to begin a new chapter tonight. Of course, over the weeks, I do believe I have been asking questions concerning what we had already read, and I hadn't gotten any answers. And I'm practicing one of the skills Bhakti Tirtha Swami mentioned in the last chapter we were on, how a spiritual warrior views the world. And he said one skill a spiritual warrior must have is to be equipoised. So that means if you don't answer my question, I still stay calm and peaceful. But my mind sometimes plays. But I've also asked if those who have been coming a while, this is not your first time, if it's not your first time, and have been hearing from Bhakti Tirtha Swami as I present his words and ideas and concepts, if you have grasped anything for your own spiritual growth or your own life, or heard any word, any phrase, any statement that you have been able to imbibe, practice, live in your life, or, excuse me, just based on what you've been hearing, seen a difference in your consciousness. Do you understand the questions I'm asking? I know some of you are in the chat room now. I don't see the chat room as I'm looking at the camera. That would be a bit much, trying to see what you're chatting and reading from the book and trying to look at you in the eye on the camera. Like we used to say, what was that? Can you pat your head and rub your stomach at the same time? So I need to try and focus, but I do have a technician here who sees your comments, tells me who's there. So I'm putting that out again. Any word, any phrase. Wow, they're noisy outside today. That you would like to share. Of course, you have choice to not reply or not respond, or to just one line, one word. And as I've said before, if you don't want to do that in the chat room, you can write to me and share it with me at Mother and Johnny 108 at gmail.com. I'm not going to say, tell me it on Facebook, because even though I'm there, I don't go there often. So what you would say would sit there for a week. You know something, I actually almost forget to go there. And then when I go in that news page, it just say, oh my gosh, too much. And I'm out of there. But please, just think about that, because I appreciate your coming. I appreciate your thank yous at the end of the program. But I'd really like to know, is this helping you in any way? Or are you able to help others? Because that's what he stresses a lot. Okay? So I don't get a signal that anybody's responding at this time, but you have the whole evening. And what we're going to do, spiritual warriors, is go into a chapter entitled How to Strengthen Ourselves. And I went there because our last chapter was How Spiritual Warriors View the World. We've been through quite a bit. We've been through Spiritual Warriors 6 about terrorism and fanaticism. And sometimes you hear a lot and it makes sense, because I feel what he says makes sense. He gives techniques, technologies, and yet we may still say, yeah, that sounds good, but how do I do it? Or I've tried it and it didn't work. But some things we have to really make an effort at. And just to review what he tells us about a true spiritual warrior, because those of you that are with us definitely are. But what does a spiritual warrior strive? He strives to master certain weapons. Remember? We've gone over this a number of times. And let's see if you remember. What are the weapons that a spiritual warrior strives? Okay? Love. Always love. You mentioned that so much. Humility. Compassion. Faith. And self-knowledge. That's important, self-knowledge. And where's the battleground of the spiritual warrior? It's in consciousness. Because that's why where all the outside nonsense is happening based on our consciousness. So we have to wage war on the consciousness of ourselves and others against the ignorance that may be there, and the lust and what the greed and all those enemies that are really pervading the society today, like an occupying army. Now there's an objective spiritual warrior with these particular weapons: love, humility, faith, self-knowledge, compassion. With these weapons, and using them in our consciousness and others, our objective is a civilization where people live in harmony with themselves and with God. And then you become awakened and in tune with this spiritual environment that is available to us. And I notice as I'm reading, he keeps telling us that, reminding us, so to speak, that this world is not our home, it's a temporary place. And he keeps reminding us of who we are as spiritual, eternal beings. I hope you're picking up on that, because as you get that, that's your self-knowledge, knowing yourself, and then who you're connected with, the Supreme Lord. So as we do this, use those weapons in consciousness, we can help others. Help ourselves, definitely, and help others. So let's see how to strengthen ourselves, just in case you're saying, that sounds pretty good, but I don't know. But I'm sure you out there have been using it. And do think about this if you've used any of these weapons recently or helped somebody through getting through to their consciousness. And what is the first title of the section we're going to begin with? Spiritual life is challenging. And what do you say? Tell me about it. It's challenging, but it's exciting. Now, how does he help us understand that? The spiritual path of a spiritual warrior is not an easy one. As we strive for the spiritual maturity to become effective spiritual warriors, we inevitably encounter numerous obstacles. And I'm sure those of you who are on the spiritual path of Bhakti Yoga, hopefully, and are studying and reading Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada's books, and are endeavoring to make changes in your consciousness, which means changes in your life, have met obstacles, and usually it's somebody saying, "What are you, crazy? You stop eating meat, that kind of thing." But it's a path, and we've gone through how to see if you're on the right path or how to study being on the path. So he reminds us that anyone expecting an undemanding, trouble-free ride should think twice before making a commitment to spiritual life. Because once we have committed ourselves, all sorts of difficult challenges arise for us to overcome. To overcome. Not to get stagnant. Not to turn around and run away. To overcome. And that's why we've been sharing these books with you. He gives us the tools, the technologies, the skills for overcoming obstacles and for purifying ourselves and being ready. Now he reminds us that these challenges serve as qualifying tests. Sometimes I wish I had photographic memory, because we've touched on these in different chapters of different spiritual warrior books. But if you've been listening, maybe when you hear it repeated in a little different way, you'll remember. So these challenges are qualifying tests to see if we are serious about entering the spiritual kingdom. If any of you are in school now or have gone through school, college, and higher degrees and all, you have to have tests to see if you're qualified. You have to write theses and things to see if you're qualified to get that degree. And what is as spiritual warriors, as Vaishnavas, and studying Bhakti Yoga, or just wanting a spiritual life and a connection with God, we have to know what the goal is. We've been there, haven't we? We've talked about that. The ultimate goal is love of God. So the process, he reminds us, is similar to school, as I was just mentioning, where our teachers regularly give us tests designed not to defeat us. Why would a teacher want to defeat? Just want to see and determine how well you absorb the knowledge and can apply it. Because as you get knowledge, it must be applied. That's why spiritual knowledge is the highest and the best to apply in your daily life. So ultimately, we learn from our test results what material we understood and what material we still needed to study. And I think it's coming back one section where we read that there's a purpose for everything. Okay? And if there's a purpose, then it's for us to learn from the experience. Now he goes on to tell us about Maya, or the illusion of this material world, acts as a teacher for God. Maya arranges difficulties, temptations, obstacles. Why? To test the strength of our longing for the spiritual kingdom. And this is twice he mentions spiritual kingdom. And it might be worthwhile to kind of look at where you are in consciousness in your spiritual life. Is there, as you're studying and chanting and endeavoring to move ahead, a sense of knowledge that this will lead you to going back to Godhead. As Srila Prabhupada mentioned so often in his books, the spiritual kingdom, because this world is not our home. Now, our reactions to these challenges indicate the extent to which we genuinely want what is available. What is our reaction when a challenge comes? Oh, here's something for me to learn from so I can move ahead. Or, I'm out of here. What am I studying this? Why is this happening to me? But if you're understanding that the challenge has to come to see if you are serious and genuinely want what is available to you in spiritual life. Now, many people do not understand why the Lord allows obstacles to appear along our spiritual path. Why does God test us? We must remember that in this material world, we are in an unnatural position, similar to that of prisoners. He uses that analogy quite often. The burden is on the prisoner to prove by their actions that they are ready for parole and can be reintegrated into the normal society. Humankind, us, we're in a similar incarcerated state. To obtain our release, we must prove that we are ready to reclaim our spiritual heritage and align ourselves with natural living. Remember, what were we in chapter 6, how a spiritual warrior views the world? Remember in the section, we're not the body. If we're not the physical body, what are we? And what is this body? That was the question I had put out. And it's the one phrase that I do remember. I try so hard sometimes to remember so I can bring it back. But remember, he told us, fundamentally, we are spiritual, transcendental, anti-material entities in a physical, in a physical form, using the physical form as a vehicle. Okay? And that's very important to remember. So what he's saying now, even in this physical form, we're still in prison because this world is not our home. And there is a spiritual kingdom. But we have to be ready, and we have to show that we're there. So he's reminding us now, we may at some point respond, okay, now I understand why God tests me. But why are my tests so much harder than those of my neighbor? Aren't we always looking outside ourselves and thinking, I'm getting the worst of it? But he tells us the answer is simple. Children in elementary school do not receive the same test as students working on a doctorate. Obviously, those studying for a PhD can expect more arduous tests because they are expected to be more qualified. So if we are on a path of knowledge of who we are, I just told you, it was quoted here, it's very simply, and who God is, and who our relationship is, we're definitely in a class above those who are struggling and wondering and just into complete sense gratification. So we have to be tested, no problem. Now, the opportunity for elevation is always available to us. If we are not serious about spiritual life, tests and obstacles will curtail our advancement. On the other hand, each time we pass a test, our qualifications increase, and we are one step closer to becoming our natural spiritual selves. This is why the tests are more difficult and more frequent at this stage. They are arranged to match the higher level we claim to have reached. And those of you who may be chanting, have started chanting the holy name of the Lord, or have been chanting, if you're mindful and alert, you'll see obstacles will come. And hopefully you've been able to realize what the phrase I would use when I understood this is, what in me brought this about? Because Bhakti Tirtha Swami tells us quite frequently, we have to look within ourselves. We have to do, what's the word? Internal checking, if you will. And then the next question is, what am I to learn from this experience? And it will be revealed to you if you are serious. So a true spiritual warrior sees each test as a blessing. Why? Because it's a chance to mature spiritually and move closer to God. And that's what spirituality means. Was bhakti yoga, if you're practicing. It's to link. Yoga means to link. To link back to God through love and devotion. And he mentions many times our true condition, our true position is servants of God. So when we recognize each test or challenge as a positive event, we approach it with zeal and enthusiasm. You approach it with zeal and enthusiasm. Oh, whoopee, another hardship, another obstacle, wow. But you're knowing, if you do that, you're knowing that we are engaged in consciousness raising. Each test is a chance to prove that we are focused and sincere about becoming spiritual beings. How was that? Any questions, any comments on those remarks of his?
Yes. Bhakti Carol says, I have a question about what you are reading about being tested. I was told that once we begin trying to approach Krishna consciousness, we will still experience karmic reactions, though these will become less and less as we progress. Can we know the difference between reactions from our past and tests?
Can we know the difference
between our past and tests? Reactions from our past and tests.
If you have chosen a spiritual path, you mentioned Krishna consciousness, and you have made a commitment to be involved in on a spiritual path. And Krishna consciousness means chanting the holy name of the Lord and being fixed on the Lord and serving Him in devotion. The tests or reactions, they do become less, and again, as we said, to know if you are serious, that you don't turn your back and say, I don't want this is too hard. It's to see how to grow from that. Because we also hear with the karmic, if you're initiated, the spiritual master takes some of that karma, but it doesn't just stop immediately. Some of it has to be worked out. And as we're going to see, and I think the same, maybe in here about Lord Chaitanya cleaning the Gandicha temple. So every little grain, every little has to be removed. So it's to know now that this has come so that I can advance and that I can overcome it. Is that helpful, Carol? Is it Carol, Carolyn, Caroline?
Carol.
Carol. Welcome. Haven't heard from you in a while. Is that all right? She answered? No?
Not yet.
Not yet. I have to be patient. No? Okay. And again, Caroline, if you want more in depth, you can write to me and we can talk a bit more. Okay. We go on that even great teachers are tested, and if you've been studying and reading and into religion of any kind, many temptations appeared before Jesus while he was praying and fasting in the desert. Satan taunted him, saying, if you're the Son of God, turn these stones into bread. Then Satan challenged his faith, urging, you have been fasting, so you must be starving. Go ahead then, pray to God to give you bread. This prompted the famous reply of Jesus, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeded out of the mouth of God. Then Satan presented another temptation, offering Jesus great riches if he aligned himself with the devil instead of with the divine Father. That is the point in which Jesus shouted, get thee behind me, Satan. And I've used this example when people are saying, they're trying to chant or trying to read something spiritual and the mind comes in with a lot of nonsense stuff. To just say to the mind, get out of here, get behind me. And it'll hear you if you're really serious and move out the way. He states that Satan challenged the Buddha in the same way. Because before his enlightenment, the Buddha was a sheltered prince named Siddhartha, who lived in the royal palace until the age of 29. Then he left to discover what was going on in the outside world. As the story goes, first he saw a diseased person, then a decrepit old man, and finally a corpse. So after observing these different stages of life, Siddhartha renounced the world and went to live as a monk. But soon he realized this was dry renunciation. True renunciation must be done with knowledge and genuine detachment, rather than avoidance. You don't avoid, you have to face and see what's going on. Rather than avoidance like an ostrich with its head in the sand. So Siddhartha decided to sit under a Bodhi tree until he achieved liberation. Whatever it took, he would remain fixed in this position until death. It was at that stage that Satan appeared, trying to convince Siddhartha that he had no right to seek liberation. And he tells us of other great saints who faced severe difficulties in fulfilling their commissions. Saint Teresa, you know her story of Avila. She had to run away from home to practice her life of renunciation and simplicity. Saint Francis of Assisi disowned his parents in public. Saint Thomas Aquinas, a celibate monk, was locked in a cell with a prostitute in an attempt to get him to break his vows. So wherever there is a serious desire, effort towards higher consciousness, some challenge will come in to try to break you. Now these experiences let us know what we can expect. Without a doubt, we will be tested at our weakest points. That is why self-regulation and renunciation are so important. They help make us strong enough to resist the attacks that will surely come our way. So this is important. Don't be afraid of tests and challenges as long as you're sure that this is your spiritual life is the primary objective at this time. Yes, you have family, you have children, you got to go to work, you got to, maintain. But you want to know who you really are, who God is, your true connection. And as he says, you will be tested. And that's when you stay fixed and firm. And you seek help, as we had quite a bit you seek association of those of like mind, others who are spiritually inclined. You read about the Lord and you talk about him. And all of this will cleanse your consciousness, because he gives them that example in a short while. But now he's telling us that we have to work on our own consciousness. What is it? You can't give others what you don't have. You can't help others where you haven't already helped yourself. So he tells the story of being talking to a group of revolutionaries and diplomats in another country. And he emphasized the importance of renunciation and regulation. Because when leaders begin to smoke and drink and otherwise indulge, how are you going to help others? And then they become prey for adversaries who seek to tempt them in their most vulnerable points. So such temptations are bound to occur. Self-indulgent persons cannot protect themselves against these attacks. So how can they possibly guide others? So he told the group of revolutionaries to first work on themselves. If they were sincere in their intention to raise others' consciousness, they had first to get their own acts together and strengthen their own consciousness. I'm sure many of you out there are listening You desire to help others. Especially you're on a spiritual path. You're reading and chanting, and you're seeing the results in your life, and you want to help others. But you must get your act together, because you can't take somebody where you haven't been. So if you don't do that, you're likely to endanger people and lead them to destruction. He's told this to those so-called revolutionaries. Genuine power is based on integrity, people-centeredness, inner realization, and the ability to act in alignment with higher consciousness. Those who possess this power become love and knowledge in action. It has to be action. In other words, healing the self also heals the community. If we wish to serve others, we must take a serious self-inventory. That was the word I was looking for. Self-inventory, and root out the obstacles that prevent us from advancing to a higher level of consciousness. And if you're studying, if you're reading Bhagavad Gita, as Krishna keeps talking to Arjuna and telling him what he needs to get out, away from, and how he's supposed to see things, you'll be able to do that. You sit and you look at yourself. Where am I now? Remember the story of Lord Chaitanya cleaning the Gandicha temple? And he says that his actions in cleaning the temple represented the process of purification for human beings dedicated to spiritual life. And what did he do first? He cleaned the outside of the temple. Do you remember the story? The buckets of water, the brooms, everything. And the outside represents the grossly materialistic aspects of consciousness, so that no dirt could be carried inside. In this way, Lord Chaitanya taught those around him about the importance of prevention. What did he do next? He worked with his own hands and used his own clothing to wipe the dirt away. By these actions, he was demonstrating that we must search within ourselves and do our own inner work of purification. He was reminding us that as spiritual scientists, we are microcosms of the outer world, and that we have to look inward. Now, when Lord Chaitanya cleaned the Gandicha temple, he worked hard to wash away the subtle impurities that might not be immediately visible. This type of almost undetectable contamination can destroy the devotional creeper, which is the immature, vulnerable sprouting of love and dedication that occurs in the early stages of spiritual life. Even a small amount of impurity can cause trouble in this beginning phase if it is not rooted out. Such impurity can grow like a weed and choke the young creeper. Lord Chaitanya was demonstrating that it is not enough to cleanse ourselves of obvious external forms of pollution. We must examine ourselves more deeply for the subtle, hidden kinds of dirt that can cause serious difficulties later on. Now that's very important. And if we've been following these, he's given us many times tools to do this. Any questions, any comments on working on your own consciousness? Who's there? How many people there? Still folks there?
3 other people besides me.
Yeah, 3 other.
Mhm.
Okay, Carol's still there.
She said thank you. That was helpful for the answer.
Who else is there?
Manjesh and Karuna Shakti.
Okay, Manjesh is Canada, am I right? Haribo, thank you for coming. And Karuna Shakti? Where is Karuna Shakti? Where are you, Karuna Shakti? She's been here before. You remember the name? Okay. Have seen your moment sometime. She say? No. Are you all comfortable with that working on your own consciousness and that whole understanding of how important it is for self-inventory? And if you ask for help, the Lord in the heart will definitely help you and put right in your face what you need to work on. Don't be afraid, because He's always there within your heart. Okay. Yes.
Bhakti Carol has another question. I suffer from hurt feelings sometimes. I think this might be false ego, pride. What do you think?
Okay. You know how you can answer that? If you sit down with pen and paper and ask yourself, as he says, do inventory. Why am I hurt? Now, what is hurting my feelings? And write down, is it something someone said, something was said to you? Then you write that down. When so-and-so said this, I have hurt feelings. And then question yourself, why are my feelings hurt? And then answer yourself, they're hurt because I don't think that's true, or I don't act that way. And then, or you can see, well, I think I'm better than that, or, or I don't like that person. The answers will come. You need to really check, because as we've been reading and studying, and Bhakti Tirtha Swami has been telling us who we really are as spiritual entities of eternal beings, of part and parcel of the Lord. And if you read Bhagavad Gita, chapter 2, where Krishna is telling Arjuna, remember Arjuna, he didn't have hurt feelings, but he got quite discouraged about going on the battlefield. And then he wanted to just stop and go in the mountains or something and meditate, and Krishna told him he couldn't. But in chapter 2, he describes that spirit soul, who we really are. And he says it can't be hurt, it can't be shot, it can't be cut into pieces, it can't drown. I hope you're reading Bhagavad Gita. And I usually add to that, the spirit soul can't have hurt feelings, because it knows it's a part and parcel of the Lord. And if you're part and parcel of the Lord, then you know the Lord's got you covered. So it's really to examine, as he says, take serious self-inventory when these hurt feelings come up. And as I said, I like to use pen and paper, and write down the feeling. what happened or what was said, and that your feelings were hurt. What's your feelings? It's not your soul. It's not who you really are. We do, what we talk about, the false ego, who has, they call it false because it thinks it's something other than what it is. You know? So work on yourself, Carol, and the more you will discover, because I said the Lord is in the heart, and as you begin, that's one of your challenges. You're being tested, you know, with that Maya just said, illusion. Oh, your feelings are hurt. Nobody should speak to you like that. But that distracts you from knowing who you really are and what you can accomplish. So work with that, Carol. You've come quite a long way. I remember the questions in the very beginning, but I'm very happy to hear where you are now, and you're moving along nicely. So continue working on yourself. Okay, is that all right?
Manjesh says, wow, I've been thinking like that. Spirit soul cannot be hurt. I am servant of Krishna. I've been thinking like that recently. Thank you, Mother Anjani. Maybe Krishna wanted me to hear that from you. And then Bhakti Carol says, thank you.
Okay. And Manjesh, more than thinking it, is imbibing it and then acting as if it is already so. Hmm? And as if a spirit soul is your beginning, and that's the process. Krishna consciousness is a gradual process. Prabhupada says it sometimes. I see that phrase. But each step is to get us closer to imbibing who we really are. And I again suggest Bhagavad Gita chapter 2. Or if you have any of Bhakti Tirtha Swami's books, he breaks it down so minutely. I'm thinking Spiritual Warrior 4. I know he talks there, he has that chapter on over-anxiety and managing anger. There's so much, and then he gives us techniques and technologies. So yes, I'm glad that this is helping you to see you're on the right. The Lord in the heart was showing you. Okay, thank you for sharing that. We still have more. Good.
Manjesh says, so in that way we must be very forgiving anyone who hurts us like that. Is that what Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj means?
He gave a whole lecture on the skill of forgiveness. It is sometimes difficult. We can really be hurt so badly. But yes, once you know who you are, and again, as I said, that's a gradual process. But as you discover and see that that hurt or whatever came from the false ego, thinking that it was controlling and running it and acting all like it was so powerful, and then you realize that the divine ego is ever there to help us, just as we read about the cleaning of the Gandhisha temple. It's sometimes we got to go really deep to impurities that may be there, or it may be some karmic. I remember when I first was, early years of my study and practices at the Institute, somebody would say something, and I would really be hurt. How could they say that to me? But then somehow I remembered at that time karma. If you have been with us as Bhakti Tirtha Swami dealt with that in the last chapter on the karmic patterns, I had that sense of I don't really know what I was in their life, past life, or some past life. So it was for me to not get angry with them, but to begin to check what in me I was to learn from that experience. And I was just having a flashback. At another point, I was having difficulty with some other members of that organization. And I remember writing in my journal, I hope you all do some journaling. It's good to just write sometimes, especially you don't want to pick up the phone and so-called dump on somebody unless you have a spiritual friend, somebody with the same mind practicing, you can talk. But I remember writing, so-and-so said this or so-and-so did this. I really disturbed me. I was really hurt. But I know there's a lesson to learn. And I remember writing, one day I will laugh about this, but right now it hurts. But I opened myself to learn the lesson from that. And some things happened behind that through the years that I was feeling, okay, I see how that went. I'm so glad I didn't go for revenge or get even kind of thing. So it sounds like, yeah, you're on a good path. But he keeps reminding us that we have to heal ourselves so that we can heal our community and help others. And that means we have to work on our consciousness, and he gives us ways to do that. So, are there any other? Maybe we'll stop there tonight. I had one more section. Any other questions, comments?
Manjir says, thank you so much, Mother and Johnny. I'm glad I'm listening to you right now. I feel so much relieved.
Oh, thank you. I'm glad. That's Gurudev. I ask for his help every time I sit down here. So let's just take, the next section is called Weeding Out Saboteurs of Devotion. Now he says, an impartial, investigative attitude is a vital tool for all spiritual warriors. Why? Because subtle interferences can arise at any moment and pull us away from the path of right action. So what must you have? An impartial, investigative attitude. Okay? So that you can really check what's going on. He says such an investigative attitude enables us to see the patterns of the mind clearly and weed out our destructive thoughts. That goes back, I don't know if you were with us through the 12 qualities of a spiritual warrior. The first quality that we were to work with was sense control and mastery of the mind. And here he's telling us that investigative attitude enables us to see the patterns of the mind clearly and weed out destructive thoughts, feelings, and behaviors in order to serve those around us better. So here it is. We must play detective. And we know when things aren't going right. We feel it. Something is wrong here. Or somebody, the Lord has that test comes with somebody coming, saying something, doing something. But if you take this attitude as an impartial, investigative attitude, you will get to the source. And then you can weed out. Because it's usually the mind dumping something at you. And the mind cannot go into higher consciousness. The mind only knows the past, what has already happened. And it keeps going back there and bringing it. And if we're not mindful and alert, we're getting upset about something that happened so long ago. So we have to have an investigative attitude and make sure that if it's destructive, like we said when the Lord was tempted, he said, "Get thee behind me, Satan," and you tell your mind, "Get out of here with that. I'm done with that." So, this is not a task that is accomplished once and then forgotten. We must exercise constant vigilance to keep our mind free from self-centered preoccupations and available for service. So we must be constantly mindful and watch that mind and know when to check it. No, not going there. I'm finished with that. And then you tell it listen to the mantra if you're chanting, or you pick up Bhagavad Gita or some spiritual book and you read it out loud, and then it'll hear it and know that you are serious. Now, one of the most venomous weeds to take root in the heart of a spiritual warrior is the attachment to name and fame. If we have a strong desire to distinguish ourselves from the crowd, to be better than others, or to be noticed and appreciated, we are not acting in a selfless way. And our so-called service is actually self-aggrandizement and not a means for feeling importance. Another dangerous saboteur is envy, which is the total opposite of love and selflessness. Envy interferes with our ability to see and hear truthfully and distort our perceptions to such an extent that our behavior can become extremely damaging to others and to ourselves. And what need do we have for envy if we know that knowledge, who we are, eternal spiritual beings? I like that. We are fundamentally spiritual, transcendental, anti-material entities in a physical body, using a physical body as a vehicle. As we get that depth of understanding, then there's nothing to be envious of, because we have a connection with the Lord, and He knows what we need, when we need it, how we need it, where we're to be at the right place at the right time for each thing, so we don't have to envy anyone or anything. We cannot understand spiritual realities by scholarship alone. Although study is important, the path to spiritual realization is through dedicated, selfless service. As we offer service to others with no expectations of reward, the Lord in the hearts becomes more available to us and provides for our needs, because we have removed the veils that hide the truth. So we're definitely going to stop there now. I got to make note where I stop, because usually I come back. I can't, what's today? 5:20. I don't remember. How is that? Any other questions or comments before we say goodnight? No. Did that, who was that, Karuna? Did she tell me who she was? No? She's still there? Okay. You want to hide from me, but you're there. I'm glad. And the others who are there. Did you take numbers tonight? I thank you all for coming, and I hope the title of this chapter is How to Strengthen Ourselves. And what we looked at, what you heard, what we talked about will help you. And make notes. Maybe next week when you come back you can share how it was helpful or how you were able to use it and how you were able to help others. How's that? Okay? Because I don't think anyone answered my questions I put out when I first came on. But it's okay. I'll keep plugging on this. As a spiritual warrior, I can't give up. I'll keep trying. Krishna bless you all. Have a wonderful week. And I'll look forward to us meeting again next week. Hare Krishna.